We are going to be recording today's session. Thank you so much. Introducing myself, my name is Ilanka. She, her. I'm the California organizer with Oil and Gas Action Network, and going to introduce today's session. But I was sharing a little bit earlier that the session today is actually a truly collaborative effort among many different organizations. So I'm really excited to share what all of us have collectively put together for you all. And to get us started, we're going to hear a message from one of our allies from Idle No More SF Bay for a land acknowledgement.
Can you move the slide forward?
And play the audio clip.
Yeah, this is taking me a second. Here we go.
Kalito, Osio, J. Jennifer Brass, Chapketos. Hello, my name is Jennifer Brass, member of Idle No More SF Bay and signatory of the Indigenous Women of the Americas Defending Mother Earth Treaty. My ancestors are Choctaw, Cherokee, Muskogee Creek, Scottish, Irish, and Welsh. In case I can't be there myself, which I don't know right now, I'm doing this recording so that you have a land education piece available for your training for the May Day action. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Just as we have been experiencing hardships, genocide, and oppressive times, Mother Earth bears witness and falls a victim to exploitation, greed, and extractivism more than ever. A full 97% of Earth is made up of water, yet only 3% is fresh, drinkable water. As we speak, water is being exploited and forced to cool down AI data centers all across Turtle Island, often without the knowledge and or permission of those who live nearby and will suffer the toxic consequences. Sacred sites such as Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, are being threatened by mining companies that could easily destroy multiple generations of ancestral ties to the land for the sole purpose of keeping profits ongoing for the extractive industry. Mother Earth does not negotiate. She will continue to live on with or without us. It is us who need to remember that we are not separate from her, but that we are part of her. Do you know where your water comes from? Do you have a relationship with those lands, those plants, those beings who surround those waters? Our Idle No More SF Bay group made a decision early in our organizing days. The founders of our group were Indigenous grandmothers who came together to offer prayers of love and protection for the lands, air, water, and babies of the next 7 generations. We made a commitment to defend and protect the sacred system of life with love in our hearts, to have no human enemies, and to do so all in a good way. All human beings have been given what we call the original instructions, a message gifted by the great Creator and passed down for time immemorial on how to protect for the next 7 generations in a good way. Since our origin, it has been important for our small but mighty core group of Indigenous people and for our allies that we pass this message along to you. As difficult as life has been for all of our relatives, it is important for us to work together, side by side, and align our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits so that our future relatives can continue to follow this path of deep connection to Mother Earth. Yakoke Wado Mado. Thank you.
And thank you, Jennifer, for sharing those beautiful words with us to really set the tone for what we're doing here today. Um, Next slide, please. Yeah, I want to share with you all like a little bit of where this session came from. In the wake of the second Trump presidency, I think many of our organizations in the climate movement, and the anti-fossil fuel extraction movement, um, took last year, 2025, to really reevaluate what, the ground we stand on, the assumptions that we've made, how we've organized in the past, and whether or not that feels relevant or useful in an ever-changing context of rising authoritarianism and fascism. And really, I've as part of Oil and Gas Action Network, we're a very collaborative group, so we've been part of many different movement spaces that, um, and it seems like everywhere we've been, we've sort of come to similar conclusions, across most of the organizing spaces that I've been a part of, which is that in 2026, um, the climate movement cannot continue to organize in isolation. We cannot afford to just stay in our own lane and not be part of a growing solidarity movement, because the odds are stacked against not just us, but all progressive movements that are hoping to create a better future are facing the same degradation of the progress that we've made over so many years. And so in 2026, I think really this is the year, of true solidarity and intersectionality. And so that's what we're here to talk about, because if we continue to be divided among different, sub factions of groups that are trying to make progress in a certain way, we're easy to get picked off, right? We're easy to defeat when we're, 1,000 different coalitions and organizations all aiming for different pieces of the pie. But that we really do need to band together as a, a progressive movement with all of the other organizations and movements fighting for labor rights, immigrant rights, trans rights, all of, Black and brown people. All of us need to band together in order to be able to defeat the rise of fascism. So that is the kind of nexus for the session that we're holding today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anna Rosa to share some of the history of May Day and why we're seeing this as such an important moment.
Thank you so much, Alanka.
Oops, I think I was supposed to go to Quinn. My bad.
Okay, pause that.
Welcome back to you, Ana Rosa, and look forward to hearing about May Day. So my name is Quinn. I use they, them pronouns, and I work with Fossil Free California. Next slide. Kind of building off of what Alanka was talking about, I wanted to take a minute before we dive into too deeply to the content and talk a little bit about the connection between fossil fuels and fascism. At least for me, I feel like with the rise of fascism in the US, I always kind of had the sense these two things are connected, and hopefully throughout tonight we can help kind of connect those dots more concretely. But to give ourselves a little bit of a working idea, I'm going to go through a like general history of the fossil fuel industry and the rise of fascism in the United States context. So, one thing that we're seeing is that throughout its entire history, the fossil fuel industry really thrives on and reinforces racist, oppressive, and unsustainable political systems, regardless of what that system is. The fossil fuel industry is gonna be opportunistic, and right now, fascism is that system that it's exploiting. Next. So, zooming back, we have racial capitalism. So, even before the advent of the fossil fuel industry or fossil fuels, there was a capitalist system that was driving the rise of colonialism, and we're going to talk about it as racial capitalism specifically because we want to focus in on the race and racial inequities of capitalism in this context. And so our working definition tonight is going to be an economic and social system based on systemic oppression and separation by race to exploit, devalue, and oppress people of color, while centering white male dominance to sustain whiteness and wealth. And some of these key elements of racial capitalism that we see the fossil fuel industry really leaning into and leveraging are uncontrolled and violent extraction for profit, slavery, colonialism, dispossession, the doctrine of discovery, which is this concept that the Europeans came up with as a way of creating an excuse for colonization, saying that if any land was not already Christian, it was theirs for the taking, and manifest destiny, which is more specific to the US context, where white men saw the beauty and the plentiful, quote unquote, plentiful resources of the United States as theirs for the taking and for the exploitation. So, next slide. Moving forward into the Industrial Revolution, the fossil fuel industry was not the first energy source in the Industrial Revolution, which goes to the water wheel and similar non-fossil fueled sources. However, the fossil fuels allowed for the Industrial Revolution to move from the center of the energy source, such as a river, to wherever labor or resources were most available to them. And with the centralization of production, it really allowed for increased exploitation of labor, increased poverty and inequality. It allowed for us to create these really intense sacrifice zones where intense production was happening that was stripping the land and the people from everything that they had. And in order to continue to perpetuate that, we've also seen throughout the past decades and over a century, the fossil fuel industry really standing up and backing a lot of antitrust laws to ensure in this quote unquote democratic system that they have as much power as possible to perpetuate their capitalist regime. And I think one symptom of that we see on a global scale as well is that oil interests in particular are connected to 20 to 50% of wars since 1973. Next slide. For those of you who look at the slides later, I'll let you kind of look back at this timeline of fossil fuels and fascism, but we'll get into some of this a little bit later. Next slide. So eventually, though, capitalism is no longer this force that allows for the fossil fuel industry to thrive at the scale that it wants to. We see the rise of awareness that there's alternate energy sources, and we see a rise of people pushing for taking back their own power. And so the fossil fuel industry really starts to shift to lean into fascism, taking away power from the people once again in order to continue to consolidate its power. Some of the elements of this that we're going to dive into a little bit more lately or more later, but wanted to introduce now are the fossil fuel industry leaning into this idea of make America great again, looking back to that heyday of when manifest destiny, everything was plentiful and we could do whatever we wanted for the select few white folks at the expense of the majority. Similarly, the fossil fuel industry started more and more blatantly funding politicians that are directly undermining democracy and feeding into their hands with enormous benefit to themselves. They've driven the repression and state violence, and they continue to drive crises and instability in order to drive up their profits. So we're going to take a slight break from this, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of May Day, which I think plays really well into this because we see that the fossil fuel industry is not the only industry or the only place where exploitation exists. Ana Rosa?
Hi again. Ana Rosa Rizzo Centino, ella, she, her pronouns, with Greenpeace USA, California statewide senior organizer. Next slide, please. So, history of May Day. Why are we talking about May Day? Again, we are all workers. There are no billionaires on this call, right? Because if there is, you should give all 8 of these organizations all your money. But this labor exploitation that Quinn talked about, this is what binds us. All of us are exploited by folks within our jobs, unfortunately. Before the labor movement, this is there was nothing for us really. We were at the mercy of our bosses, however long they wanted us to work. It was up to them. Whether we could go to the bathroom, it was up to them. Too bad if you get a bladder infection. So this working class holiday originated from a movement demanding improved working conditions and greater recognition for workers' contributions. In 1884, a National Federation of Unions announced a campaign to establish an 8-hour workday by May 1st, 1886. So workers in cities across North America went on strike leading up to that date in one of the era's largest and most tumultuous periods of worker revolts. In May of 1886, police in Chicago shot striking workers, prompting activists to organize a protest in the city's Haymarket Square. When a bomb exploded at that protest, killing one police officer and wounding others, police opened fire into the crowd, resulting in the deaths and injuries of both police and protesters. So, despite there being no evidence tying 8 men to the bombing, the fact that several men were not even present at the demonstration, 7 of these people were arrested and sentenced to death. These are Samuel Fielden, Albert Parsons, Louis Ling, who actually committed suicide the day before his execution in order to not be killed by the state, August Spies, Adolf Fischer, George Engel, and Michael Schwab. Oscar Neebe did not get killed by the state, but he did end up getting sentenced to 15 years in prison. And this is a history that has been buried, right? A lot of people don't even know about May Day. They know about Labor Day, which happens in September, but they don't know about May Day, which was our original Labor Day. And some of you may be more familiar with the protests that started happening more recently when May Day became focused on immigrant rights in the US. So May Day is an important day for activists organizing for social change. And past May Day celebrations and rallies in LA have called attention to some of the most urgent challenges facing the community, including threats against immigrant rights. One example is the powerful A Day Without an Immigrant action on May Day 2006, when hundreds of thousands marched in downtown Los Angeles. And this was in response to HR 4437, which was federal legislation that threatened to criminalize migrants as felons, as well as anybody who helped us. Next slide. So again, a lot of the things that we now take for granted, the only reason why we have them is because of labor unions. So this includes 2-day weekends, maternity and paternity leave, 8-hour workdays, actually having a retirement age, having workplace pensions, having paid holidays, equality and rights around LGBTQ issues, having a minimum wage, collective bargaining, the NHS, sick pay, being able to get a pay raise, health and safety at work. And how did we get this? Through a lot of organizing, a lot of strikes, a lot of deaths, unfortunately, that people don't know about. I bet those people's names that I just mentioned that are martyrs from the May Day strike in the 1880s, you had never heard their names before. Next slide. So all of these gains are wonderful. However, a lot of migrant workers, unfortunately, have been left out of this, specifically farm workers. So, for example, farm workers don't have overtime pay. And you see them working out there no matter what conditions are happening, even if there's a wildfire, no matter what's going on, farm workers are out there. And unfortunately, migrant workers are controllable by threats of immigration enforcement. So when folks try to organize, a lot of times that's like the first things that employers will pull out is threatening to call immigration on migrant workers. As far as farm labor, because that's an area I know the most about because I've been doing it since 1998, as far as organizing, something simple like a clean bathroom is not something that farm workers can take for granted. Even now in 2026, there are porta potties that haven't been cleaned for weeks out there that farm workers are forced to use. As far as H-2A guest workers, when I organized in North Carolina, there were farm labor camps where people's refrigerators had locks on them and they couldn't get anything out unless they asked for permission. So those are just some examples. Next slide, please. And why is this work so devalued? Well, Quinn talked about racial capitalism, right? And the anti-Blackness that stems from it, and the fact that Black people were the first ones to do this work in this country since the foundation of it, in addition to Indigenous people, of course. But Black agricultural labor is not a footnote. It's the foundation of this country and today's food system. So, here in California, before you saw um, brown migrant farm workers doing this work, Black migrant farm workers were doing this work. And farm owners honestly want to pay as close to nothing as they can because this country had a history of paying Black people's nothing for building everything. Next slide, please. And of course, there's exploitation of women at work. In the US, women working full-time year-round earn approximately 81 to 83 cents for every dollar earned by men, meaning that nearly all women in this category make less than their male counterparts. This gender pay gap persists across industries, education levels, and age groups, with women of color often facing wider gaps. And this is from the Pew Research Center in case you need to get the direct information from that. And of course, as we have been hearing about a lot recently, approximately 38 to over 50% of women experience sexual harassment in the workplace, with some studies suggesting lifetime experiences for up to 81% of women. Despite or because of this prevalence, over 75% of incidents go unreported primarily due to fear of retaliation, job loss, or doubt that employers will address the issue. And this is a statistic from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. And so just a reminder that even though we make up half the population, there's still a lot left to be done around rights for women at work. And again, I'll mention that farm laborers specifically have even a higher percentage of facing sexual harassment at work in the fields. So these are all issues that we have to fight back on. Next slide, please. And so through what we've been talking about, there are these interlocking injustices that we have to fight back against together. So these include systemic racism, poverty, environmental devastation, militarism, religious nationalism, homophobia, misogyny. And like Alanka said, if we only work on one or the other issue, it's so easy for those who are in power to pick us apart from each other. So gone are the days where we're going to pick which fights we take on. We have to take it all on. We are all together in this fight against fascism, and we need to fight back in a way that gains are for all of us, not just some of us. I think that's my whole part. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one more slide. Forgot about this one. This is actually my favorite slide because it's a reminder that even though everything seems really gloomy, there's so much hope that we can see around us, and that when we fight, we win. Just this week, a federal judge just ruled that U.S. Border Patrol violated UFW versus Nome injunction during a July 2025 Sacramento immigration operation, finding agents conducted stops without reasonable suspicion and failed to properly document their actions. So this ruling confirms what we have said since Border Patrol first attacked farm workers near Bakersfield. Border Patrol cannot round people up just because they are brown or black or speak Spanish and work hard. The court made it clear that the Border Patrol raid on day laborers in Sacramento, like the raid on farm workers near Bakersfield, was unconstitutional. And not only are we winning now, we have seen victories dating back so far. Even here, just in Oxnard, we're going to be commemorating an event around the Japanese Mexican Labor Association. It was the first ever successful multiracial strike in the fields. And this was the sugar beet workers. So just want to say that even though we feel alone, our ancestors are with us. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and there's so much more that we can win for our communities when we work together.
I think we're on to the next slide. Okay, that's me. We go on to the next one. So I just have a little tiny piece that I'm going to do here, which is just that, as a lot of us doing climate work felt like we needed to step into kind of a broader frame for doing our work, and wanting to see our climate struggle as part of the broader struggle to maintain, democracy and to fight for democracy. We started using the phrase fossil fueled fascism. And I just wanted to, and Quinn's already used it and already talked about it some, but I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on the concept of fascism, because a lot of times people will use the word kind of casually and just mean something sort of a right-wing, power-hungry government is what I would say, a lot of people. But other people have been much more cautious. And I know for myself, I don't know, 10 years ago when people said our government was fascist, I'm like, our government sucks. There's a lot of terrible stuff about it, but fascism isn't the word that I would use for that. And I know for a lot of us, that caution comes out of respect for just how horrific 20th century fascism was in its murder, in Germany, especially of millions of people, among them Jews, Roma, queer people, disabled people, leftists, and many others. So that's one reason for caution about using the word fascism. And the other one is the need to sort of be precise in our language so that we can keep fascism as a particular concept. And so it doesn't mean just like a very, very bad government. It means a particular kind of very bad government. So one of the ways that I think about this is that an authoritarian government, I'm just reading the slide now, is one that tries to control all aspects of society and close down dissent. It holds power closely in a small group, and it isn't accountable to its people. A fascist government is a version of authoritarianism that runs on popular support. It emerges in contexts that require elections to hold governmental power, where the people are in danger of not acting in elite interests. So fascist governments do something very kind of particular in the way they mobilize people's kind of energy and passions. Next slide, please. So then a fascist government is one that creates in and out groups to get people to bond emotionally with its movement. So, and I think that sense of like, there's a we who are the people who matter, and then there are these other people who don't matter, who we're going to treat really badly and kind of get all excited about hating. That's a really important part of what fascism does. And not all authoritarian governments do that. It uses the power of government, violence, and threats of violence by both state and non-state actors to intimidate people into compliance. It uses systems of law for its power, but it also routinely violates the rule of law. It acts in the interests of an economic elite while pretending to be anti-elitist. And a fascist government will use anti-intellectualism, attacks on media, and cultural activism to pull people into its way of thinking and feeling. And I think feeling is a really big part of fascism, to get people sort of to kind of bond with things that don't make sense, like the Trump regime, because of some like deeply felt sense of belonging that people are looking for and that the fascists kind of play on. So that's why we're using the word fascist. And now back to Quinn to talk about fossil fueled fascism.
I think this is actually Alonka.
Yeah, this is me again.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, so as we've been sort of building the case for why fossil fuels need fascism, right? We're seeing that in a democratic society, people will continue to choose forms of energy which are not harmful to our communities and which are regenerative, instead of choosing energies which oppress and pollute people. So the fossil fuel industry needs fascism in order to continue to function in the current context of the world. So they are exercising different types of power in order to consolidate their stronghold on our government and to funnel more resources into the fascist regime. Next slide, please. So we're breaking down the types of power that the fossil fuel industry uses to fuel fascism into different sections. So they obviously hold a lot of domestic political power. They are one of the, if not the largest lobbyists. So they in the last election spent almost $500 million to shape the election, with hundreds of millions going directly to Trump. And but they don't stop there, right? Like their contributions to the electoral system go all the way down from the president to to local elections. So they're deeply entrenched in shaping that. Um, they're the president of the Western Energy Alliance was the person who wrote the energy section of Project 2025, which is the guidebook that the administration has used to repeal all sorts of progress that we've made in the energy sector over the years. And of course, they're also influencing and shaping public narratives. And now they're even trying to seek legal immunity from all laws and lawsuits that hold them accountable for climate damages. So that's the latest ploy that they're trying to pull off at the federal level right now. Next slide, please. And they're getting their money's worth, right? This administration has on day one declared a national energy emergency in order to get away with all sorts of things. As Cynthia was mentioning, like they're using the law, but also like basically breaking every law at the same time. So they're using the power of executive orders and to get rid of things they don't like, and then when there are laws in their way, they just bulldoze right through them. So here's a long list. I'm not going to read all of these things, but you are going to get these materials at the end. We'll send this out to you when you registered. So you can refer back to this list if you find it interesting, of all the different ways in which the Trump administration has given, probably 100-fold payback to the fossil fuel industry for their contributions. We'll focus on a couple of these in the next couple of slides. Next. And we also want to talk about the intersection between big oil's domestic power and their international political power. So the US has for many decades used this like global domination for resources, energy, mining, and extraction from global South countries. And they use militarism and creating political instability to their benefit. So we wanted to highlight this for you all. Like there is this cycle of US global energy dominance that relies on creating instability in other countries such that they can extract resources. They often use the military to, to control those areas and to cause destabilization in other governments so that they can control the global energy market, right? The US is now the largest producer and exporter of fossil fuels in the world. And and this administration seems very hell-bent on continuing that pattern and to further that pattern. So we know as people who work on fossil fuels that that fossil fuels drive conflict and instability themselves through the climate crisis, right? Like we are seeing more and more people being displaced from climate damage and from the political instability that our foreign intervention causes in other countries. So we talked about military power protecting extraction. The US has a long, colorful history of keeping dictators that we like, that allow us to extract resources from their country, and overthrowing governments who try to exclude the US from their markets. So the most vivid example of that is currently Venezuela, right? We didn't like that President Nicolas Maduro excluded US interests from their economy, and so they went in and kidnapped him. And the Trump administration is saying the quiet part out loud. He just straight up said, we're gonna go get all their oil, right? Like they're doing it for oil and they're not hiding it anymore, even though, in the past we've done the same thing for other governments without saying that part. And of course, this, causes huge profits for fossil fuel companies, while communities both at home and abroad pay the price. We also want to talk about the invasion of Iran, which is literally blowing up right now. And maybe something that you didn't know about is that right after the Iran invasion started, the Trump administration created an executive order to compel oil to start flowing through the pipeline, the Sable pipeline in Santa Barbara. This pipeline had been offline for 10 years since it had caused the second largest oil spill in California's history. And it was bought by this company. They were doing repairs, trying to get it open again. They had a bunch of permits that they needed to acquire from the state of California. And the Trump administration just said, none of that matters. Go ahead and start, completely usurping the authority of the state of California in the case. So this is actually a constitutional crisis moment that I wanted to bring up to you all, in which we are seeing the intersectionality of um, this destabilization of other countries being used as the justification or the excuse to bump up domestic production in the United States. Next slide. And of course, they have a lot of economic power. They act in the interest of the economic elite while pretending to be anti-elitist. This is one of the elements of fascism, right? So big oil will spend lots of time and money pretending that they care about people, and that the reason that they want to continue to exploit us is to provide reliable energy. They rely on this imagery of workers and common people, and they use fear tactics of rising prices, which they often create and artificially inflate as a way to prevent favorable policies. They constantly engage in price gouging. Prices tend to go up when there are crises and don't really tend to come down afterwards. This is what we're seeing in California over and over again. It's they'll use the excuse of some shock to the system to raise the price, and then it doesn't ever go back down to what it was before, even when the cost of crude comes back down again. And they're using their economic power to tie up legal challenges to them in the courts. So they hire teams of, dozens and dozens of lawyers to make sure that any efforts that attempt to hold them accountable never actually resolve. Next slide. And cultural power, this is a big one. So the fascist regime, they uses these fake populist messages to distract from oil as being such a player in this extractive economy. And at the same time, Big Oil invests heavily in research and advertising to promote climate denial, to present biased research, to equate energy independence with this masculinity, strength, dominance posture, while presenting renewable energy as weakness or softness or unfavorable things. They also fund a bunch of front groups that pretend to be normal people that care about energy independence, which are just fully funded by the fossil fuel industry. And they do all sorts of sponsorships to greenwash their image. So they buy out, they, donate heavily to events, sports teams, community organizations in order to buy their favor in communities that they pollute and exploit. And I have a great example here of the Politico Energy podcast, which is, if you zoom in the corner, presented by Chevron. How can you talk about unbiasedly about energy policy when your funding comes from big oil? Next slide. And I'm gonna hand it over to Ashmu to tell us more about where we go with all this information and what our next steps are.
Yay, thank you, Alongo. Wow, that was a lot. Whew, that was so much information. Let's all just take a quick, deep breath together. Whew. because I'm here to talk about, by the way, sorry, Ashmia from Sunrise Movement Bay Area, we're a youth-led climate organization that's also had to change over to understand we have to be fighting against fascism in order to save the planet, right? But with all that information, I want to talk about, okay, what do we do about it? How do we win? How do we fight to make each of our dreams come true? You know, what does it look like to build a better world, and like what do we need to get there? Next slide. Because this country right now runs on our obedience and our alienation from each other. You can do one more slide or one more click. Yeah. So if enough of us came together, we are far more powerful than they are, and they know that. That's why they use these divide and conquer tactics to keep us separated by race. That's why they use the police to violently repress us. That's why they pass laws that benefit wealthy individuals and corporations and limit the power of the people, because they know that if enough of us were to disobey, to not cooperate, they would not have power. Next slide. And before I get into what my section about is really, I want to see if anyone knows at the top of their head, or when I say the word non-cooperation, what does that make you think of? Are there any examples to type into the chat about what non-cooperation is? Anything, the first thing that comes into your head. I'll give it a second. Yeah, boycott, strike. Oh, any specific examples? I want to know if there's anything you know that has actually happened. Sit-ins, yes. You can click twice. So I was trying to ask for like specific examples because I want us to see that this has actually happened before. So we can think about the Montgomery bus boycotts. That's an example of non-cooperation. Gandhi, the salt marches. Yes. So yeah, specific examples. Yeah, the chat is going off. Perfect. Yeah, searching things like Target, boycotting Chevron, sit-ins in front of Hilton. Yes, you guys are so on it. Vietnam drafters. So right here and now, we can look at history to show us that we have done this before and it's possible. So if you have not, Ice Patrol's Minneapolis. Yes. Okay, so you guys know. We all know. For those of you who've never heard of the term non-cooperation, I'm going to just talk about it real quick. So next slide. So everything we just talked about right now is what's called non-cooperation. The basics of that is it's the act of refusing to cooperate or comply with requests, demands, or orders. Alonka just talked about 3 pillars. One more click. If we do non-cooperation right, we can cause one of these pillars to fall or at least become unstable. And by knocking down these pillars, we will eventually knock down fascism. Next slide. A little bit more about non-cooperation. If you're still confused, it's refusing to participate in. And if you look back in the chat, you can see all of these examples of ways we can do that. It can be economic, it can be social, it can be political. Next slide. So people were already writing in the chat, but there are examples of tactics right now. And so the first one I'll talk about is an economic boycott. That's refusing to buy goods or services. Click once. Example is there was a boycott for Avelo. And so this was an example that actually happened and that it worked. We were able to get Avelo to say no more deportation flights for ICE, which is amazing. And there's other examples of that. Boycotting Target. Cheryl put that in the chat. By boycotting Target, they lost a lot of business. There's and the sit-ins in front of Hilton that have caused Hilton's Sunrise has been a big lead in doing these Hilton sit-ins, or what we call wide awakes, and that was able to we've calculated about $18 million we've lost Hilton so far. Next clip is for worker and mass strikes. So a couple weeks ago or months, I remember the exact date, 2 months ago, I think, Minnesota was the first to do this statewide strike that said no work, no school, no shopping. And what happened was 1 in 4 Minnesotans didn't go to work or school or shopping that day. And that was a really good test of mass non-cooperation and something I'm really excited about as we're about to talk about May Day. The next one I saw someone put in the chat is tax resistance. And so if that is something you're interested in, that's being talked about a lot right now. And then last is this social non-cooperation. A great example of that is a lot of artists were refusing to go to the perform in the Kennedy Center. And the Kennedy Center is like going down because of it. So that's a good example of social non-cooperation. Thank you. Next slide is fine. And then I'm glad we understand already what non-cooperation looks like. I do want to touch on a little bit about unjust laws and like the moral implications of it. It's something that's been talked about for years and years and years, back to Henry David Thoreau and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Those are people who are like, if a law is unjust, are we morally obligated or can we stand up to it? Because you may be sitting like thinking, I don't want to go against the law. I'm a good person. I'm not an anarchist. I'm here to do good, right? But there's a moment when we see a law and we want to do something about it. Is there any example that you can put in the chat of unjust laws that people have stood up to? Drop in the chat. I will say one of the most notorious examples of an unjust law is the Nuremberg laws, which were enacted in 1935. They stripped German Jews of their citizenship, prohibited marriages, extramarital relationships between Jews and non-Jewish Germans, and severe restrictions on their daily lives. If you can see any similarities there. Another one, yeah, I'm seeing some in the chat. South Africa apartheid. Those were laws that people decided to stand up to. So laws against gay marriage, perfect. So you can see that just because a law is a law doesn't mean it's morally correct, right? Next slide. And I think that requires a shift from compliance to being conscious. Laws are not intrinsically just, and it's our responsibility to uphold like a moral standard. And then second, I wanted to mostly touch on this is the collective responsibility. That second bullet point is we can do things on our own. So like the boycott is a really good one. I don't go to Target, I don't go to Starbucks, right? So that's something I can do on my own. And it helps. But what's really important is shifting to this community aspect of it. And this is all important leading up to what we're about to talk about next. But community is important and wise when we're doing something like non-cooperation. And that's because some things are like there's strength in numbers, the moral support, and then there being a shared narrative that amplifies the voices of the marginalized. And it also moves us from reaction to proaction. Next slide. And I do want to, I touched on that first part, which is like, is just because a law is a law doesn't mean it's moral. But I do also want to take this a second to recognize that civil disobedience can also be looked at as a luxury, and people with social privilege are able to do it. I don't want to deny the fact that there's marginalized groups that will take on a lot of risk to participate in mass non-cooperation. I want to recognize that, but I also don't want to say turn away because of it. We've seen it happen in the past from groups that have been marginalized. And so it's important to know that while there is privilege to being able to do it, there is, and there's risk. So those of us who can participate, we have a bigger responsibility. But I just want to recognize that not everyone can participate, and know that we understand that. All right, I hope that was good. Wait, I think I have one more slide. Sorry. No, that's it. Oh, yeah. So who's ready? But can I have some emojis and reactions in the chat for who's ready to participate in mass non-cooperation, or you're excited or you're interested? Because I'm excited to pass it on to Leah, who's going to talk about May Day.
Hey y'all, Leah, she, her with the Oil and Gas Action Network here, and I'm so glad to be with y'all tonight. Next slide. So now that we've learned all about how intertwined fossil fuels and fascism are and how important it is for us to bring this into our organizing and get out there and work together with the rest of the movement, let's talk about how we're going to do that, particularly in leading up to May Day. Next slide. So this year, social movement organizations are working together to plan for major May Day actions under the May Day Strong banner. Our partners at Power Up, the movement to end fossil fuels, are organizing end fossil fuels contingents all over the country to join the May Day Strong mobilizations. And through these contingents, we will uplift the fact that oil and gas billionaires who torch our planet are bankrolling Trump, funding authoritarianism, and propping up an unequal economy where the rich get richer while the rest of us struggle. We have a huge opportunity right now to demonstrate that protecting communities from fossil fuels is key in the broader nonviolent movement to protect our democracy. So, next slide. So, what's the plan? So, the first, we want to gather together as many people as possible so we focus on building a bigger base. And we know that 8 million people turned out for No Kings. And so this is a moment to help all of those people find a place to focus their resistance into real change. So we start with reaching out to all the other climate orgs in our area, creating a coalition in your local area. Then we do outreach at related events, tabling, flyering, even presenting. You could offer to present at a local event. And one thing I saw Sunrise use very effectively at the No Kings event was to do post-march gatherings. So they created flyers that they handed out during the march and had a meetup spot where they provided snacks and food and had organizers present to talk about how to get people involved, because that allowed them to have one-on-one conversations. And it's those individual conversations that will be our best possibility for bringing more people in. And we need to create the environments where we can have those conversations. So, and then the ultimate goal is being to recruit and train new organizers. You can try to have low list tasks that you can invite people to do when you're talking to them so they can get engaged right away. Next slide. So then once you start moving into a bigger and bigger group, you want to create a shared identity, building connection to become greater than the sum of our parts. And one of the really important considerations, as Alanka was talking about earlier, is intersectionality. We know that Big Oil is not just a target of climate groups. There are so many constituencies and groups that are being harmed by big oil. So local communities, health-related organizations, indigenous groups, and if you're talking about Chevron, then even Palestinian rights groups are working against Chevron. So you can show up for other actions organized by other groups. And a great thing to do is bring consistent messaging whenever you go somewhere to participate in any kind of group. And we'll talk more about messaging in a minute. So next slide, once you've created your group and made a shared identity, then you mobilize. And so we can demonstrate our power by getting out into the streets at strategic moments to protest, rally, and mobilize at scale. And May Day, of course, is going to be a huge moment for this. We are going to disrupt business as usual, create moments for impactful narrative interventions, and force decisions from those in power. So we hope to use nonviolent direct action to change the narrative. We hope to absorb new people into our organizing through this process. And I'm sure most of us were out for No Kings on March 28th. Are there other mobilizations that people have been out for in their area recently? Let us know in the chat if you've had other mobilizations on the streets in your town, things that you've been involved with to get out there and let people know what's going on. All right. Yes, no detention center in Dublin. Yes, that's a huge one here in the Bay Area. So glad you mentioned that one. Yeah, so next slide. Once we start mobilizing and getting out in the streets, we can begin to shift public opinion. And the biggest issue is we need to mainstream the message that oil and gas billionaires are fueling multiple crises for their own profits, and that elected leaders must use every tool at their disposal to ensure a just transition off of fossil fuels. And these are two examples of campaigns, ad campaigns or visual campaigns that fossil-free media and for the Make Polluters Pay campaign use that I think are both really effective. The Hurricane Helene brought to you by Big Oil, I think is really powerful. So we can do this using the creative art, cultural, visual, narrative tactics. And next slide, we can think about messaging. And so we use Fascism Runs on Fossil Fuels for our banner at No Kings. And some other good ones are Big Oil Funds Fascism, Fascism Equals Ecocide, and Separate Oil and State. If you have seen any others or have any other ideas for good messaging in this vein, you can throw that in the chat as well so we can collect all those ideas and share them around. And then once we have organized our group and started to shift public opinion, we are going to be heading out to, next slide, May Day. So find the May Day event nearest you and bring your contingent out. Grab your group and be part of the big action that's going to be happening that day all over the state, particularly including no work, no school, no shopping for that day, and help people find their way to stop whatever they would normally do that day and come out and be part of this so that we can show the incredible power, people power we have and the economic effect that we can have together. So next slide. After May Day, it would be great. Continue to build your base and think about preparing to defend elections. So there is an Adopt a Vote Center campaign that you can join. I'll put the link in the chat for that in just a minute. And reach out to friends and family to ensure they have voting information and continue to attend events to spread the word. So with all that, let's think about recruitment planning. How can we get more and more people together on this? So next slide. So if you belong to an organization, organizational recruitment by emails, by social media is going to be really important. We have a toolkit that we will share the link for that'll give you samples, sample flyers, samples, social media, all of that to use to promote May Day. And then Earth Day is a really key opportunity for everybody to get out and talk to people, flyer, give information about May Day, get people engaged in that. And then, as we said, individual conversations are probably the most effective way we have of bringing people into the movement. So take just 2 minutes right now. Think of 3 people in your life that you could talk to about joining these efforts. We know that so many people came out for No Kings People support climate action, they have concerns about saving our democracy, and they just need information on how to get involved. So think about three people that you know that aren't yet involved, that have those kinds of concerns, are interested, are concerned about climate, and write their names down. And we'll next turn it over to Zoe, who's going to help prepare us for how to have those one-on-one conversations.
Thank you, Leah. All right. Um, oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me? Okay, wonderful. Hi everybody. My name is Zoe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizer with 350 Bay Area. Wonderful to see you all on this call. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can have some of these recruitment conversations. Next slide, please. Um, oops, this is, oh yeah, next slide, please. This is correct. So kind of just looking at and slide after this, please. Kind of just looking at a formula of what we can use to talk to people and have these conversations. And um, I think that probably for most of us, where the situations that we'll be having these conversations will be, either one-to-one or like in a group, if you're hanging out with friends, if you're talking to family, if you're talking to neighbors in a casual setting. Or if you are involved with climate groups, or if you are doing this sort of thing, you might be going to some environmental justice events, some Earth Month events this month. I know there's a lot going on, so I'm sure a lot of people are going to be seeing a bunch of folks. So this is kind of a way to think about how we can talk to people about this while we're there. So a formula you can use that will generally work, and you can adapt it to your situation, is to introduce yourself and what you're doing. Obviously, you don't need to introduce yourself if you're talking to like a friend or something like that. But you can also share your motivation, why you care about this issue, and kind of what brings you to it. And in that, you can find the ties that make them, whoever you're talking to, find common ground, something that they also might get fired up about. So if you're talking about, how awful it has been to see, the war in Iran progressing, that's something that people can care passionately about. Or you can talk about how gas prices are super high or something like that. Kind of get people in that range with you, and introduce May Day, talk about why it's important and talk about what's happening. And you can keep it super simple, and make the ask super simple as well, because the ask for Mayday, as they talked about, is very simple. And there's a whole range of how people can participate. The simplest way to talk about it is by talking about no work, no school, no shopping. And those are not exclusive things. They're not all encompassing. So, you can do two of three, you can do one of three, you can do all three. But you can also do those three and do more. So you can show up to a climate contingent, you can show up to a protest or an action. But starting with that no work, no school, no shopping can get people who are not really familiar, or maybe not comfortable, maybe not active in this space, onto the on-ramp of taking action in this very accessible way. That will also make a big difference when everyone does it together. So if you go to the next slide, please, I'll share an example of what I might say to a friend. So if I was talking to somebody, I'd be saying, like, have you heard of the Day of Action happening on May 1st? May Day? May Day is traditionally, it's for International Workers' Day and a day people march for immigrant rights. But also this May Day, there's a national call for no work, no school, no shopping, kind of like those blackout days that we've done in the past. But this one's going to be really, really huge. Basically halting business as usual, hitting the billionaires hard in their pocketbooks, make them see it where it counts, make them lose money. And I'm planning on doing all three. And this is going to be a really gigantic mobilization. Are you also down to participate? Do you want to join? Do you want to come with me to this protest that I'm going to? That's as easy as it can be. It doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be a lot. And it can be very casual. if you go to the next slide, please, this is an example of what you might say to somebody at an Earth Day event. So this is a situation where if you're at a table or if you have flyers, we've put in the chat some of the some flyers that you can print out for this. So if you're handing somebody a flyer, you're talking to somebody that you might not know, but you kind of know that they might have similar values. They might care about the earth, might care about the climate. And you might say something like, "Hi, do you know what's happening on May 1st? My name is Zoe. I'm with 350 Bay Area. I'm out here talking to folks, let them know about the mass movement happening on May Day, why it's important for the climate. Personally, I'm really sick of seeing those in power only serve their billionaire buddies, and we're seeing that in full force right now with the war happening in Iran, with them trying to get their big oil buddies richer and richer while they pay the price, while we're paying double. And on May 1st, May Day, climate concerned people across the country are going to be mobilizing in this massive coalition of people. The call is very simple: to not participate at work, not go to school, and not shop. And if you want to, you can also attend an action. We're trying to get as many people to participate as possible to hit them where it hurts. Are you able to join in? That's an example of what one might say at this kind of situation. Um, and yeah, I see in the chat someone talking about how people seem to respond being reminded how effective the Minneapolis one-day strike was. These things really do make an impact, and the broader goal of this May Day Strong event is to have a critical mass of people across the country participating, and reaching that, 3%, 5%, as many percentages as we can to really have a huge impact. So next we are going to be doing a very quick exercise where you get a chance to practice this. And we're going to put you into teams of 3 quickly, and you get a chance to just do a version of a spiel. And as I said, we're going to send out materials as well. But next, I'm going to pass it over to Scott. Close us out.
Hey everybody, I'm Scott Arkin, he, him pronouns. I work with Diablo Rise Tide. I also work at Rainforest Action Network. I could go over a slide. So I'm the sort of wrap on the day, on the presentation tonight. And so I'm going to be talking about how to best make a May Day contingent. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a checklist, but to be honest, there's like bigger checklists that can come with like organizing your contingent. And so the first thing you want to do is make a plan for the day. Like, what's your meetup spot? Do you have a group text chat? I'll say that often what we do when we organize marches and actions is that we'll start a signal chat, like an open public signal chat that people can join, just so they can get information on that, and make it admin only. Is like a sort of important thing. And for the Bay Area May Day stuff, I'm sure we'll be circulating that stuff. And then also, as you're making your May Day contingent, what's your plan if people get separated? How do you reconnect with people? Just like different things to think through. And then the other piece, which was like some feedback we got from No Kings, is like, what's the close for the day? Often people get together, if they march, they spend the day together, and then they just sort of like trickle away. So the other important thing to do is think about, like, do we do a close, even if it's as simple as like a circle up or somebody saying a few words, depending on how big your contingent is. And then things to bring. You want to have a lead banner which really says in fossil fuels or whatever it is the message of your contingent is. Bring in a variety of art. Sometimes people go with that kind of art that like you make it an art build that all like looks very similar. But sometimes I also think the creativity that I see in social media from like different things and all the different signs and all the different messages can be also like pretty powerful as well. And then another important piece is one way to actually help keep people from getting separated. And then also can be like a very colorful way to, sorry, a very powerful way for art and display of like who you are and what you're there for is like to have flags. And then it can also be a way to signal to your group where you are if you're in a big crowd. Another important piece and looking forward to future organizing is I always encourage people to take sign-up sheets. It's something I hear when I've heard the No Kings complainers complain about how people aren't really organizing. I'm like, people should have sign-up sheets out there so people can know where else to get involved. And I think that would be a very important to take flyers about, what the connections are between fossil fuels and fascism and what we're doing on May Day, chants and songs. And then the last piece, which is like actually really important, is going to be outreach. And so like doing that outreach of turning out your friends in your community, wherever, email, text, phone banking. Often people just turn up and wonder why there aren't more people there. And part of it is like we all need to be organizers and recruiters at this point. And then I will also say that the organizers of this call have actually proposed holding office hours, like virtual office hours, to help people plan their contingents, either this coming Thursday or the following Thursday. And if we could maybe see in the chat, if you would be interested in joining some office hours to sort of talk through, brainstorm, what you could do with your contingent, either this Thursday or next Thursday, if you could drop that into the chat, just any thoughts you have on that, or if you would just be interested in joining it, if we put that out. I might just wait for a minute for people to do that. It doesn't seem like there's a lot. So sure. Okay, and then my other question is if there's any just as a Q&A, is there any questions that people have from the presentation? I believe it's also part of the close here. And you can raise your hand or you can put questions in the chat.
Maybe you can go to the next slide, Phoebe, so that people can check out if you would like to take our contact info as well. We have that listed.
And also, I believe Alonka created a feedback form too, which they just dropped into the chat.
Yes, the slide deck will be made available. We'll send it up in our follow-up materials.
They asked him,
So if unless there's any other questions or anything, I think we're gonna wrap it there. I don't know if any of the presenters want to say anything with the close.
I'm not sure, I forget if we mentioned this already, but there is going to be an in-person version of this training happening next week in Oakland, at I believe 5:30 p.m. And hopefully one of my co-facilitators can send the link in the chat. If you found this training to be useful, helpful, one, please fill out the feedback forms so where things to improve on, and two, help invite other people to go to the training. That'll be a little bit more in depth and also talk about some of the actions. We'll have some more details there. And that will be at the in-person training next week, next Tuesday. Thank you, Quinn, for sending the link. Yeah, invite everyone. I also want to say thank you to everybody who showed up today. Really great turnout. Really appreciate you. Please, when we send out the recording, share it out to a bunch of folks and really appreciate all of your engagement on this very important issue.